Today I have for you a 20 model Ford F-350 with a right front floor leak. Now this repair, I'm going to briefly touch on the diagnosis of such a leak, but this repair that I'm going to do is going to apply to F-150 through probably 450, probably Expedition and Navigator as well. What it ended up being on this one was the air conditioning drain, the evaporator drain. It drains out onto the ground, but also back into the cab. So without getting into a massive diagnostic routine here, for a right front floor leak, first thing you're going to do is obviously verify that it's wet. All right, I've already done that, but you're going to pull the mats up, and if you look on that one, you can't see it really on the camera, but well, a little bit right there. But there was when I pulled it up earlier, big old condensation spot. So, you know, obviously we're in the south here on North Carolina. It's hot, it's humid. People run their AC and they just absolutely pour water. I mean, it's just, you know, it's unbelievable how much water is taken out of the atmosphere and put on the ground by air conditioners. So if one ever starts leaking back into the truck, it'll put more water in one than the rain ever thought about putting in, for the most part. All right. Clearly, if you have a right front floor leak, you're going to look at your vehicle and maybe start from the top. I pretty much jumped right to this after checking a couple other small things because I do so many of these. But, you know, generally speaking, sunroof drains, make sure your windshield's not leaking. If you got a crew cab truck, you're going to check in the rear, cabin vents, rear glass. I can't tell you how many right front floor leaks on trucks are coming from the rear, because the channel that's under this scuff plate here goes all the way to the back, and if water gets in the back, it just cruises right up here, because most trucks sit down in the front a little bit, and that's where the water ends up. But not the case here. This is an air conditioning drain leak, and you can see this part right here. This is just a cover. All right, the AC drain, you see that round piece of, that's sealer, or actually seal. All right, the evaporator case is attached to the firewall, and that seals the hole where the AC drain sticks through. And you'll see in the rest of the video, I've already actually done the repair, and I'm kind of doing this after the fact, but you'll see me under the truck looking at the drain, and you'll kind of get a visual there. But to diagnose whether your AC drain is leaking, what you're going to do is, it's usually pretty easy. A lot of times, if they've been leaking for a long time, you can pull it down, and then right here, there'll be nasty mildew, just the funk. I mean, it will be awful. But what should be good enough is the fact that I can press it right here, and my hand, you see, I don't know if you can see that moisture on my hand. I think you can. That's wet. All right, that's mostly not going to be wet from a water leak way back here in the floor where I'm filming from. So that's AC drain. If you want to do it even further, you can stick your finger behind this thing. It's kind of tight, but you can push it at the bottom and push up on it. And I don't know if the water's coming, but it's wet. I can feel it. It's wet. So there's no way that would be wet unless it's the AC drain leaking. That should never have any water on it at all, ever. So if it does, your AC drain's leaking back into the car. The following video after this will show you how to stop that. Okay, this is what I go through for everybody here. I'm getting too old to be laid on my back, but yet here I am under a Ford F-350 with a leaking AC drain. Okay, so right there in the picture is the AC condensation drain, and it's got that little metal silver cage around it. All right, so I'm gonna zoom in. You can sort of see that little tab sticking out through the rectangular hole in the cage. That's sort of a little chin on the AC drain, and water's supposed to come out of the end of this drain right there at the end and hang on that little tab there and drip down. Well, you can see the hole around it, and it's got a gasket that's mounted from the inside on the evaporator box. Well, what happens is water runs along, it tries to drip out straight to the top of this picture here, and instead of dripping straight down, it drips along the bottom of that thing and runs up against the seal and eventually saturates the seal. Most of it's still dripping out of the car, the cab, but it saturates the seal, and the seal eventually starts wicking it in like a candle into the interior. So it can be draining on the ground and in the car at the same time, and it can absolutely flood one, particularly if you live in the South like I do, where it's very humid and ACs just produce tons of water. So the fix for it is you peel that little cage off of it, trim off those two tabs on the bottom, and install a 90-degree elbow that reaches past the opening of that big hole there. And then also the forward service bulletin just tells you to take that cage off, put the elbow on, and then put some kind of foil tape to hold the elbow on there. It's not really necessary if you do it my way. What I do is I take the cage off, I trim those two tabs right there off. You could use side cutters or whatever you can get your hand up in there with. And then put some sealer around them and up against the hole. And when you put that elbow on there, it'll basically be glued on and it won't be a problem. Anyway, that's what we're going to do, and I'm going to see what I can do about filming this while I stick my hand up in there. Alright, let me back off and I'll be right back. Alright, I got my arm up in there. I just grab this and just peel it off. You got to get your hand under it a little bit. Let me see if we can get back on it here. There we go. So I'm going to grab it right there, and it just pops off. And here it is. It just pops off. It's just a little metal cage. It's pretty flexible. Nothing to it. All right, there is the drain. And you can see it's wet all the way to the base. See that? You can see it's obviously wet. You can see where it's dry and where it's wet. The water has been going all the way to the base, up into that sort of little recess place, and it's hitting the gasket. And it just saturates the gasket, and the gasket eventually gets saturated and it sucks the water in. So we're going to trim those things off. If you have a 250 or 350, you can probably do like I do and get underneath it and reach straight up. That's easier. This truck here is a diesel, and I can go ahead and tell you, let me back this up. I can go ahead and tell you that you're not going to get to that from under the hood. An F-150, you can theoretically reach from under, like crawl up under the hood and reach your hand down in there. You're not going to do that with a diesel. There's too much stuff. So the best, and plus a diesel, an F-250 sits up higher, and you don't really need to. It's easier to do it from under here. If you have an F-150, it's easier to do it under here too, but you just can't get under them there very well. But if you have a lift or maybe a jack and some jack stands, you could probably get to it. So anyway, I'm going to trim those off, and I'll be back. Right. Looks like I can get over to the side of the frame rail. I'm going to try to film myself. Okay, there's snap, snap, and then ooh, that one's tough. All right, you can see there's a little bit of a nub left on it, and that's not really a big deal. I've seen people get down here and sand this smooth. Unnecessary. That's enough of it right there. The problem is, the reason you need to snip these off, I should have mentioned that, they're big enough that when you slip the rubber 90-degree elbow over there, they will actually push the elbow away from the tube, and water will come out the bottom and run in between that drain tube and the rubber and still go right back into the vehicle. I have fixed quite a few rechecks on where techs in shops didn't know this and just slapped it on there like you're supposed to, and they still leaked. And I took it off and snipped this off and put some sealer. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to dry off that water. I'm going to seal around the opening underneath there. I'm going to wipe a little bit of sealer. What I'm using here is adhesive silicone, not just regular RTV. I'm going to use adhesive silicone because that'll glue the seal. I mean, RTV probably would work too, but I'm just using clear adhesive silicone because that's what I carry for this. I don't normally use silicone for fixing leaks, but I'm not really fixing the leak with the sealer. The sealer is literally just going to hold the elbow on there. The elbow is what's going to fix the leak, but I do feel like this little extra step here is worth it, so you don't have to do it again. So anyway, I'm going to dry that off, and put some sealer on there, and then I'm going to put the elbow on. I'll be right back. Okay, you can now see the glistening sealer, I guess. And what I did was I went around this, and you can kind of see it right there. I went at the bottom and coated this. Now that is just insurance. What I've done is coated the seal that it seals the evaporator box to the firewall, just in case. And then all you're going to do, you're going to take it, the long end goes down. You're going to take it and just push it on there, put it up there, and you are done. Now that leak is done, and I hope it helps somebody.